Coming up on this episode of the Roundtable.
They've so entirely constructed this universe in which to even entertain positive thoughts about Donald Trump amounts to heresy, excommunication, anathema, the scum of the earth. And they think that that's an actually, compelling way. And for a lot of people, of course, that is a compelling thought world that prevents them from thinking outside their bubble, right? Like if I even entertain the possibility that maybe Trump is the victim here, like I am flirting with authoritarianism and fascism and wrongthink. But there's a whole universe of people, I hope, and actually believe who actually aren't persuaded by just constantly being browbeaten, into not even entering into the possibility that maybe like Trump has a point or something. So yeah, I see why if you were a smart version of Merrick Garland, you might be hesitant about doing this sort of thing. But in the real life version of Merrick Garland, I think he just imagines himself so immune, because he's the anointed, like all these guys, they're the anointed and like they can do sort of what they want. I mean, time will tell whether they're right about that. Hello and welcome once again to the Roundtable, your weekly publishers and editors podcast from the American Mind. I'm your host, Spencer Clavin, features editor at the American Mind and associate editor of the Claremont Review of Books, and I am back, baby. It's been a fun couple of weeks, but I am very, very glad to be back. Missed you guys here on the pod, and a special thank you to Seth Barron, our managing editor, who's also here today. There was a poster in the 40s when France fell in World War II of Winston Churchill saying, "All right then, alone," saying he would fight Germany, on his own. And I feel like that was Seth while we were gone. He did like a solo podcast all to himself. So thanks to Seth for that. We're also joined, and it's always an exciting time when this happens. We are joined by Matthew Peterson of New Founding fame, and also, of course, formerly editor of the American Mind. So we have a full docket, lots going on. Let's get right into it and start by talking about the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago. I think we have not yet talked about this on the pod, so there's lots to discuss, many developments that have ensued since the raid on Mar-a-Lago. The FBI, probably most of you already know the basic details here. Mar-a-Lago is obviously, Trump's private residence in Florida. It's the, famous and kind of extravagantly Trumpian location, but it also is, according to the FBI, a place where Trump has documents that he was not supposed to have, that were classified, that he had held on to after presidency, so on and so forth. There's been the usual kind of back and forth when you deal with the FBI about, well, how much can they release? What are they, they're not telling us everything about what they want out of this. But of course, there's, they are making moves to publicize the search warrant. But of course, there's a big question about the connection between this and the January 6th trial that's been going on forever and ever and will continue, world to that end. Amen. The much speculation regarding, what kind of evidence the FBI and or the Justice Department are trying to gather together to, make it basically exclude Trump from political life, make an arrest, something that would keep him out of American politics. Trump has responded with indignation, calling the raid unprecedented and unnecessary, also demanding an independent review of the records as of this recording. That's sort of where things stand. He's asking for a review, and he's, of course, talking about one thing that he had mentioned is that he had declassified these documents, so actually it's all okay that he has them. In many ways, the kind of back and forth over the documents itself seems to me somewhat less interesting than asking, what is the end game here? Do they think they've got something that they can pin to him that will enable them to do what they are obviously chomping at the bit to do, which is just, exile him from life altogether, political life altogether, and neutralize him for 2024 and thereafter. I want to get the guys' opinions on this, but let me just, I guess we've now kind of laid out the basic architecture of this thing. On some level, one supposes that they already know, in their minds, the FBI, the Justice Department, the Democrats already are convinced that Trump is guilty and deserves to be excommunicated, if not, worse. But they just need the kind of crime to pin it on. Nothing has stuck yet. No impeachment has worked. None of these attempts to delegitimize him, formally and finally have succeeded. But it certainly looks like they are on the warpath. What do you guys think?
Sounds about right. I mean, it's funny you said like they want to, I guess, exile him from American politics or get him out. But it's not like they really do want to get him out of American politics.
Right.
Like they need him in American politics, but just not like as a successful elected. They need the threat, right? It's kind of like if you had Napoleon on Elba, I don't know, more tight.
But he could tweet or something. Yeah,
but he could tweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, or I guess Helena was too far. But it's kind of weird. I mean, everybody was saying like, well, clearly they didn't raid Mar-a-Lago just to look for these documents, that they were looking for January 6th stuff. But, I mean, maybe that's true. But at the same time, I sort of assume that that maybe the January 6th thing, well, they've milked what they could out of that. Like that juice, they did their like 12 hearings, they televised it, all of that. It didn't really move the needle very much. I mean, Liz Cheney still was destroyed. So maybe they're just moving, I feel like this is what they do. They just move on to something else. Well, we'll look around in his offices and we'll find documents and we can probably, surely they'll be able to come up with something that they can pin on him, or they can just, like for a few days they were saying, well, there were very important nuclear related documents. And then like that the anti-Trump people just picked up the hint like instantly. I don't even know if they had to be communicated clearly, or if it was all just like, sub rosa, but everyone was like, yes, he was selling our nuclear secrets to our enemies. And the only question is which enemies are getting our nuclear secrets. So, I mean, these kinds of imputations and insinuations just to, besmirch the guy further. But it's weird. It all seems to just redouble his supporters' commitment to him. It again strips away the, whatever cover there is that the Democrats in the U.S. is run like a third world, this is like Peru or Pakistan, where you routinely put whoever was in office before goes to jail. Like that's kind of the way they're running it, and it seems like it's becoming more and more obvious that that's the mode here, and it's kind of sad, but that's sort of where I see it going.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I mean, it's the sort of thing that shouldn't have surprised anybody, but I think these, instances of shock where you really see what's going on, you see the regime at work, still jolt people. And, it really shouldn't have surprised anyone. This is what they've been about from day one. They absolutely need to indict Donald J. Trump and make sure he doesn't run again. They need him, yet they need him as you point out, Seth, and they want to use him as the example of their power. They have to crush him in some way. He cannot, of course, walk through that White House in the future. And so where do you go from here? I mean, I think it was useful, actually. How I learned to stop worrying and love acceleration. The title of my next book. I think it's useful, actually, because it just jolted everyone back into awareness, back into the groove of, oh, right, we have a one party or an oligarchy that seeks a one party state, and they've completely weaponized the government, and they're absolutely going to use it to prosecute and harass, the former president. And that was useful. And it was also shocking to me how quickly I could feel it in myself, by the way. Everyone just rallied and thought, yes, we're all behind Trump. He's going to run again. Talk of DeSantis quieted for a while and even soured in some cases. And all of a sudden people were, back behind Trump. Now they recognize this. I mean, the more, moderates, God bless them, people who aren't even wolves in sheep's clothing, but just kind of classic moderate midwits who still think they live in some kind of, normal situation, who lean, were Democrats. They were upset by this. I mean, they many of them said, you don't want to keep doing this. You're just going to make him a martyr. But that's exactly, they're not going to be able to restrain themselves. So I almost see this kind of acceleration as good, actually, because it helps keep everyone on notice that, this is the state of affairs. This is not going to get better. They're only going to continue along these lines. And 2024 is sort of the ticking time bomb as to what happens when forces collide again. And they have no intention, as our friend and colleague Michael Anton has written at Compact Magazine, of letting him back in. They're not going to let him back in. And that's what, in their minds, it's inconceivable that he could be president again. And they want him, behind bars or whatever. So I think that you're seeing a ramp up. The acceleration increases exponentially of, the FBI is corrupt, to the FBI is arresting people and publicly harassing them, right? And we still got, 2 years to go here, folks. I mean, we got a year of the next year is going to be insane. God knows what we'll see. I think, I would expect, if you're just looking at the timeline, to see more actual lockups of the opposition. And especially with probably some kind of Republican win coming in November, I think we'll see a bunch of new rhetorical tropes and new points of attack come out to further delegitimize the right and to accelerate a kind of, accelerate the tightening of the permanent state, on the federal government and on the election system.
Yeah, there's a school of thought that says, well, they wouldn't have done a full-on raid, unless they really knew they had something solid, because they're aware that they're risking all this political capital, that people are going to go ballistic when they see, this brazen and assault on this political usage of the FBI. And I see that argument. I can understand drawing that inference. But Matt, what you're saying is kind of reinforcing my own sense that I don't think they're anywhere near that self-aware. Like, I think like that represents the calculus of somebody that actually believes there's like people out there, reasonable people out there, that might have a varying, set of opinions about Trump. Some of them like him, some of them don't, some of them are in between, and their actions might actually influence, those decisions. So maybe they should tread carefully or whatever. I think like I don't think in Merrick Garland's mind there's such a thing as like a decent American muddling through, trying to figure out what he thinks, who would look at the FBI like raiding a private residence out of like nakedly political motives and say like, oh, like maybe Trump, isn't the worst thing on our plate after all. Like, they've so entirely constructed this universe in which to even entertain positive thoughts about Donald Trump amounts to heresy, excommunication, anathema, the scum of the earth. And they think that that's an actually, compelling way. And for a lot of people, of course, that is a compelling thought world that prevents them from thinking outside their bubble, right? Like, if I even entertain the possibility that maybe Trump is the victim here, like, I am flirting with authoritarianism and fascism and wrongthink. But there's a whole universe of people, I hope, and actually believe, who actually aren't persuaded by just constantly being browbeaten, into not even entering into the possibility that maybe like Trump has a point or something. So yeah, I see why if you were a smart version of Merrick Garland, you might be hesitant about doing this sort of thing. But in the real life version of Merrick Garland, I don't even think, I think he just imagines himself so immune, you know, because he's the anointed. Like all these guys, they're the anointed, and like they can do sort of what they want. I mean, time will tell whether they're right about that.
They are the law. Right. I mean,
right.
And they know it. So this no one above the law thing is hilarious. I mean, everyone's above the law, right? As everyone's pointed out. I pointed out on my Twitter. Oh, by the way, I have a confession to make, guys. I do have my own podcast. I have cheated. I have cheated on the American mind. And I do.
Well, nobody else here has any podcasts. So
I do. I'm in good company, I know. And I have something called the Matthew Peterson podcast. But I think the no one is above the law thing is ridiculous. You know, there's all kinds of people above the law. Illegal immigrants are above the law. 2 million this year. You know, Epstein's above the law. Everyone else, Hillary and the Clintons and everyone else. So everyone knows this. They see this. They don't care at all. I mean, that I think you're right. I mean, ultimately, the mindset is Trump is evil. He must be destroyed. He is a tyrant and he is a lawbreaker. He belongs in prison. And we know this. He's an insurrectionist. He is all these things. That's known. That's given. But the main problem is they are the law, literally, as the kids say. And they know that. And there's nothing to stop them. Nothing. There was no consequences, of course, for Russian collusion, yada, yada. They're just going to keep doing this. And that may lead to their own destruction. It may lead to overreach, but the overreach is just growing by the day. So, I mean, it's just a raw increase and increasingly naked, power grab, and it's not going to stop. Sorry,
yeah,
Seth,
oh, no problem. I think what's so funny is the valorization of the FBI now in the eyes of the left. And they see it as like, I don't know, like the United Way, or, I mean, it's just like the most salubrious organization.
Or the CDC.
Yeah, the CDC. I mean, here's like, I screenshotted this from The Intercept, which is ostensibly like a left wing, like a really left wing kind of. The Intercept is the kind of magazine, the kind of thing like, I don't know, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, I just imagine they would have been all over the FBI. But so there's this article by James Risen who won a Pulitzer, and this is the head in the deck. It says, FBI search of Trump's Mar-a-Lago triggers slow motion rerun of Jan 6 insurrection. A new wave of attacks and threats against the FBI show that Trump's followers are unrepentant, continuing their assault on democracy. So, I mean, they've completely made an equivalence between respect for democracy and, like, saluting the FBI. I mean, this is completely like something out of, like, I don't know, J. Edgar Hoover's like journals, like that. People who don't respect the FBI are like really like un-American. And I mean, it's so perverse what they've come up with. And now I've seen plenty of things all about how, oh great, now the right wing is fueling mistrust in the IRS because they're hiring all these new agents. But of course we need new agents. It's really weird how the left, and really like even like I guess what you would call like the progressive left, the hard left, just loves federal law enforcement now. Certain agencies, they still want to defund ICE. They, like you said, like illegal immigrants are above the law.
The only like WTF, I love the establishment now, right? Yeah,
like
right, hard state power.
Sure. I guess the people who are not above the law, like, like regular Americans who own rifles, and have jobs and, maybe try to avoid paying their income, like, practice tax avoidance, so they need to be audited. They need to be surveilled. They need to be investigated. We need to send agents to their house to find out why they have guns. This is America, I guess. And yeah, I think Matt's right. Like Merrick Garland doesn't care if like people have a question about what they're doing or if they're going too far. they're making the road as they travel. That's their view. Like the future is unfolding before them, and they're just like creating it. So there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah, one thing that this makes me think about, Seth and Spencer, is that people, why do we have to keep having this conversation when it's clear to us how bad the situation is and what they are? You know, we've created this national security state, and all the libertarians, we have to admit, were correct in the 2000s about a lot of this. I mean, from the Patriot Act to the digital surveillance of all of America, of all of our emails, texts, everything else. The government already has this all-seeing eye. It's been abused, 6 ways to Sunday for years. And now it's just being employed more nakedly against political opponents. Well, of course, who don't they investigate, right? The U.S. Marshals, Tucker just had a segment about, going to this Amish organic farm and ordering them to cease operations. The regulatory state. Meanwhile, of course, what did the marshals do? What did the FBI do when we burned down all the cities in America? Nothing. I mean, so when you look at this, though, why don't we know this yet? I think part of it is that America, ingrained within the American culture, is a respect for law, and it's almost cognitive dissonance for all of us. And this is what the left is playing off of, and it's laughable rationally, right? I mean, how dare you be against the FBI? It's un-American. But it's so ingrained in us that we have to constantly be shocked into realizing, wait a minute, no, this is really gone. They've really taken this over. They regard half of America as the enemy, and it is a politicized body. And it's just hard, I think, for all of us, even as cynics as we are on the show, to consistently conceive of the U.S. government in that way, especially the powers of law enforcement. But the reality is, the facts are, this has been happening for 20 years, and it's just the culmination of what has gone on, and it's going to continue. As Seth said, they're going to continue down the road that they're building in front of you. And it's weird that we need these jolts like the raid for everyone to go, oh my gosh, what is happening to this country, when this is a continuous thing. And that's, that makes it harder to game out what could potentially happen in the future, because it's so hard for right-leaning Americans to sort of grasp onto this. Does this make sense to you guys?
Yeah, this was one of the great insights that sort of launched Daryl Cooper / Martyr Made, I think. If you go back and look at that, mega viral thread that he wrote, which we then published on the American Mind, so you can find it there too. I think it's called The Disillusionment of the Deplorables on TAM. And one of his central insights was that the kind of mental gesture of respecting authority is so deeply ingrained in the conservative American mindset, because, for good reasons, right? Because certain, as Aristotle, I think, says in book 2 of The Politics, like a certain respect for law as law is good per se, right? Even if there's things you want to tinker with about the law, you should also be cautious about tinkering, because in and of itself, it undermines the kind of order inherent in having a legally ordered society. And so conservatives, very understandably, are defenders of law enforcement and of the state and all these things. And as Seth is pointing out, right, it used to be the left, or at least the libertarians, who were kind of injecting the salutary skepticism about these kind of massive state organizations and their control over our lives, or their awareness of all of our data and so forth. And now it's just like, WTF, I love spooks all of a sudden on the left. It's like, we're such big fans of authority, and this has been that's sort of not a new insight into the modern left, but the Daryl Cooper thing and what Matt is saying, that like it just runs so counter to the grain of kind of conservative instinct to recognize that these institutions have been so thoroughly corrupted and taken over and restructured in this kind of Wilsonian way, that in fact they're not your friends, and then the institutional fear. And I see this actually all the time also in the domain of education and higher education. People who know in their hearts and in their minds that, like, Yale and Ivies and all these big name schools are actually the worst schools in America. They actually miseducate people. Still, you have to, make a conscious effort not to just instinctively send their kids there if they can, because that's the credential and the power of that and the kind of inertia of we talked about Seth, you mentioned that guy that won a Pulitzer. I read a book on my trip that won a Pulitzer called Less. Perfectly fine book, but it was like, the worst thing about this book is that it has won a Pulitzer because it's such a complete nothing burger, but it happens to be about a gay guy. So all of these things that, like, we know these are true. The Pulitzer Committee is corrupt. They gave one to Nicole Hannah-Jones. Like, the Ivies are crumbling from within. They're zombie suits of themselves. They're meat suits. Like the FBI is the kind of weapon in the hands of very bad people. You can know these things, but you still don't feel them in your gut for all of these kind of ingrained reasons. Let's move on, since we have a full docket and time is ticking. I wanted to talk about student loan forgiveness because it's happening as we speak, essentially. There's been noises about this forever. They've dragged out I have to say, in a kind of canny and calculating way, the Democrats have dragged out their discussion about student loans and kind of will they, won't they, teasing about whether they're going to forgive. And it kind of took on new momentum with COVID, I think, because they hit pause on repayments and then they, kept extending the deadline, and they still haven't, reinstated repayments. And one of the things that Biden announced today is that those, nobody's going to be repaying or have to repay any student loans, and no student loans are going to gather interest until the end of this year, December 31st. And previously, it was, sometime in this month, I think, end of August, it was going to continue. But the big news now is that he's going to cancel. The federal government will cancel $10,000 in student loan debt for Americans earning $125,000 or less per year, and extend the pandemic era pause on payments. So, I mean, I don't really have much to say about this that our friend Inez Stepman has not said already in our pages and elsewhere and in forceful terms. There's really nothing, there's no more naked form of class warfare currently in our politics than student loan forgiveness. And it goes back, I guess, to what we were talking about, brazenness, just a sense, as Seth mentioned, that these guys, they're learning more and more what they can get away with, and it's inconceivable to them that anybody would have concerns or that anybody's concerns should matter. This is like a check essentially written to the upper middle class on the part of lower class people, and the 125K salary cap doesn't mitigate that. This is something that we will add to our inflation problem, and besides which, as I think it was Sajar and Getty, I'm not sure if I'm saying that name right, on Twitter, pointed this out, that if you don't reform the colleges, which they have no intention of doing because the colleges are very much their instrument of indoctrination, if you don't reform the colleges, we're going to get back to the same problem in 4 years. I mean, the issue is not that people are saddled with student loan debt, although it is very burdensome. The issue is that this whole system is basically designed to impoverish people and give them nothing in return, or worse than nothing, because it basically turns them into drones of this sickening ideology. But I don't know. I guess I'm now just ranting. I'm not hosting or introducing the topic. So what do you guys think?
Well, I like the moral hazard angle that you alluded to there. That, I mean, the entire reason why college tuition is so expensive is because it's subsidized by and guaranteed by cheap federal loans, which you can't get out of. I mean, they follow you. You can't bankrupt yourself out of them. This has all enabled the cost of tuition over the last 40 years to increase at triple the rate of inflation, if I'm not mistaken. This has all been completely paralleled by a massive expansion of university administration, including diversity, equity, inclusion hires, this whole new, the expansion of deans and deanships to oversee, minority hiring, minority student life, Title IX investigations, all of that. Yeah, I mean, it's essentially like the universities have become essential, basically like some other arm of the federal government. And yeah, they're not going to get rid of that. They're not going to sit on the universities to roll back their costs, their spending. Yeah, it's really demented. It seems clear it's an election ploy, right? I mean, they'll take away $10,000, and all these people, sort of liberal arts grads in prestige type jobs, or who want prestige type jobs, who can't really, make ends meet. And there's like, come out and vote for us, and we'll knock up another 10,000 next year. I mean, that isn't that what's going on?
Yeah, the amount and the like incremental nature of it is really indicative of that, Seth. I think like $10,000. As somebody who has student loan debt, right? Like $10,000 isn't going to fix it. There's almost nobody. A vanishingly small percentage of people with student loan debt are actually going to move with this into a situation where like student loan debt is not a factor in their finances. Like that's not a thing. So it's obviously not designed to fix even that problem. Even leaving aside all the other objections that we might have, it's a little crumb. It's like, there's just the tip. If you forgive this much, maybe if we reelect them, they'll do 20,000. And this is the same thing with keeping people on the hook with like, do I have to repay or do I not have to repay? It's actually an incredibly manipulative and sadistic thing, even just at a psychological level. They're very good at it. It's I have to hand them that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is that kind of campaign ploy that doesn't solve anything. But it also, I'm not sure it looks so good for the right. I mean, there definitely is a lot of boomer conning going around. I noticed today
that you took out a loan, you should pay it, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of like this whole thing. I mean, first off, the American taxpayer will have to pay. The American taxpayer, like I'm already paying for Clown World. Right? I mean, are you kidding me? Like, so it's not as if we're in this pristine system and this is some terrible thing in the midst of some kind of system where it makes sense what we're paying for. The whole thing's a joke anyway. Not that excuses it, but the deeper problem is that the entire system of loans, et cetera, this is all a smoke and mirrors game with large scale, government and quasi-government organizations, and it all goes to fund the beast of what's destroying America and education. And so you got to get rid of it at some point. And I just think, the usual mantras may work a little bit, but you got to get out of the old framework to argue about this stuff. And I see way too many, politicians like, I shouldn't have to pay for someone else's whatever. Like, that's where all your tax dollars go, right? I mean, we're paying for 2 million illegal immigrants. I mean, we're paying for. The question is, in the midst of that, I tweeted this today. As you loot the treasury, which everyone is saying, which is the correct line. We're in the late republic. Dave Rabois' late republic, and we're looting the treasury now. The Republicans don't really loot the treasury for their regular voters. That's against their principles. They'll loot it for more elite interests, even though those elite interests also hate them. And the Democrats know, like, yeah, this is time to start doling it out to everybody. And in the midst of that, it just, I don't know, it seems a little weak, the complaints, even though it is dumb in any way you look at it. What I would like to see, and what would make the right's complaints a little stronger, is if they had a plan or a few major plans they were rallying around to completely eradicate the federal loan system. And that's so important to me that I would much rather spend the money to do it, to pay off all the loans in order to get rid of the system. I would make that trade if it was possible. That's how bad it is, right? I don't think you have to do that. I think there's a lot of other options, but you certainly have to put you certainly should put the university system on the hook for the loans. And in other words, give us a radical proposal to solve the problem, and don't just bitch when the Democrats try their latest ploy to cynically gain votes by a half-assed measure that's not really going to do anything other than put America deeper in debt and add to inflation. I don't know. It's frustrating because we are still so far away from when the Republican Party as a whole seems to grasp publicly how bad things are. And so when they complain about this stuff, it just seems out of context. That said,
Yeah,
don't get me wrong. I think it's I think it's just a dumb. The whole thing is terrible.
Right. Well, to turn a phrase, right? It's like it's a structural critique that we ought to be making rather than this particular like news cycle anger. Absolutely. And even to the point of saying, well, look, like we acknowledge that a lot of people, the thing where it's like, well, you took out a loan and now you have to pay it back, right? I get the reasoning of that, and I understand the resentment if you're somebody that did pay for college on a shoestring budget or whatever. Like all of that is true, but it's also not a winning message to all the kids who really were like shunted into this system with absolutely no idea what they were signing up for. Like you can say, well, when you're 18, you know when you sign on the line, and like yes, that is like that's true. One of those things that's true in the abstract, but not actually reflective of the reality of the situation. Like what we really need is a campaign to educate everybody less. We need less education, and that's what's just when you're 18 and it's you're told that like the key to the whole world is a degree from one of these places. And it's like, sure, of course I'll saddle myself with $100,000 in debt to get this access. And for some, small percentage of people, that's probably worth it in some weird way, right? Because then you actually do have this golden key that lets you into all the. And so that entire thing, which is related to the prestige concerns we were raising at the end of the last segment, right? Like that is. Very much what we're actually against. Like we're actually against this thing where, in order to participate at the maximal level of American life and like get all the goodies that are at the cream of the aristocratic, skim the cream off the aristocratic top, like you're gonna have to enter into this incredibly bizarre and like arcane system of recherche, like fideism, that you're going to have to swear fealty to this entire, and you're going to have to impoverish yourself and dig this enormous hole of debt as you're starting your professional life in order to do it. Like, so yeah, like technically people, you pays your money, you take your choice. People know what they get into and they are adults when they sign up for these things. But there is like a much, much deeper structural problem going on here.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and we should say it out loud. It doesn't to be sure, it is unjust for someone who who worked and paid in and found a way to make it to get an education to then have to pay for other people. I get it completely, but that's not the only side of the story. The other problem is, the other injustice is exactly as you say. You have an entire system that tells kids from the time that they're young, in the media and in the institutions they go to, that they need to go to college. They needed to go to college. Going to college is important. And then when they're 18, you're going to come to them, and there's a whole admissions department that these organizations that have, in many cases, billions of dollars in the bank, right, are using to draw onto them and propagandize the youth to sign on the dotted line. This is what you need to do. And that entire system of adults that there's billions of dollars revolving around is somehow not to blame at all, and you blame the 18-year-old for signing up for these loans. That's not the whole story. It's absolutely true that a lot of these people shouldn't be going to college. It's absolutely true that you have your wealthier liberal arts grads studying basket weaving or whatever, but you got a lot of poor kids too who've just been bamboozled into the system. And again, it's exactly what you're saying. I mean, we need to say this is a systemic problem and it needs a systemic solution. And on the one hand, it's not going to be fair just to say, well, make everyone, who's solvent pay everyone's loans off. On the other hand, like you're going to have some kind of probably jubilee to get rid of this system. And what I would say is you go after the wealthy organizations that are destroying America and propagandizing the youth that they need to go. Charlie Kirk, our friend Charlie, has tried to do this and get people to pledge to not give, right? Take the money they were giving and then actually catalog it, how much money is moving out from funding the universities. But we've been talking about this on, whatever we want to call ourselves. I mean, the new right or new thinking about this for a while. We're going to need soon, to see some action, some serious politicians, maybe after this November, start picking up this issue in a serious way. and just proposing real serious systemic solutions. What I hate is the loser mentality of this incrementalism, like, we don't really have like a solution to the system. And then you go around the margins and say things that you think are popular little mantras based on tropes in people's heads on the right. What we need is someone to say, like, we're going to solve this. This is what's going to take to solve this. It's a big deal. It's a big friggin' deal, but this is what we're going to do. And people would rally to that. There's the rhetoric here is on our side, but now we're just, everyone's fiddling while Rome burns. And yeah, what the hell, $10,000, $30,000. Yeah, I mean, it's all funny money at this point anyway. Like, go nuts. I guess the acceleration in us should embrace it and just say, great, let's get rid of all of it.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that would be great. I just go back to that moment. I guess it was in the 2016. Was it 2016 or 20 when Liz Warren was confronted by, I guess maybe it was 2020. Was confronted by some guy, she was saying, we need to eliminate student debt. And this guy was like, well, hold on a second. Like, I paid off my kid's debt, or I paid for my kid's college or whatever. Will I get my money back? She was like, of course not. And then you hear the same thing, like people say, well, so-and-so didn't go to college. Instead, he bought a truck and now has a job chopping down trees or whatever. See, the problem is, like, yeah, I agree with you. Like, we don't obviously want to be blaming like these 18-year-olds who were duped, but at the same time, a lot of these college grad, like liberal types who are, I think, the people who are being targeted and will be the beneficiaries of this. They see it that of course, like the who or the people who have some job like chopping down trees or doing whatever they're doing, or who had enough money to pay off their debt, or went to a state school. Of course they should be paying for my student loans, because I get the feeling that, I mean, maybe this is a little extreme, but like there's this inverted producerism whereby the people who have degrees and are very proud of their degrees, regardless of how saleable or marketable they are, see themselves as the creators of the nation's wealth. It goes back to this whole idea that, like, well, the blue states create all the wealth and the red states steal all the wealth. I don't know. There's a weird kind of snobbery and entitlement that I think is being fed into here. Yeah, I don't want to like pick on everybody who has student debt. Actually, you know what? Like, I just sent my kids through school. I mean, whatever. I've got a whole bunch of it. So, it's a concern, obviously, for a lot of people. But I don't know. I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think you can't get away from the fundamental injustice of the fact that even if the system is unjust, then you're going to rectify, the two wrongs to make a right, where you say, yes, and now we're going to bail everyone out with, the taxes from, these truck drivers or whatever. And that's ridiculous. It's a minority of the country who did go to college. Shockingly, for most people, when they see the numbers, how few people go, and subsidizing it. I mean, I'm not saying the traditional conservative argument doesn't make sense, and I think that I think they have another think coming. The Democrats do with this, because it definitely helps a constituency, but populism is very real right now. Those fires are raging. You can already see the response online. The most powerful part of it is people saying, hold on a minute, like, these people are going to pay for these people because you guys think, the college is good. Part of their argument is not necessarily the injustice of the system. They're walking a weird line because, as Spencer says, they support that system. Mm-hmm. And that needs to we need a better job to systemically point out, that this whole thing is corrupt, and the entire way in which this is conducted is ridiculous. And the federal government should not be, subsidizing loans. This is insane at this point. I mean, it really is insane. Like, we are just funding our own destruction, just funneling money into these corrupt organizations that are increasingly just incompetent, as well as promoting evil or harmful doctrines. And the whole thing is ugly.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out also that you said it best, Matt, that, the resentment of somebody that now has to foot the bill for this stuff is completely palpable and understandable and indeed just. But it's also not the entire story. And it has the added disadvantage of turning the populist movement against itself, inward against itself. And for that reason, I would imagine that the left loves to hear us talking in this way, right? Because now it's like the truckers versus the laptop class. And it's like, actually, we're both taken advantage of in different ways. Like, and that's more of, I think, a winning message. And yeah, people would rally to like total reform of this system. Okay, a shorter one to end off here. I'm really interested to know what you guys think about this. This is like, for old school TAM fans, this is Roundtable core to be like digging into something completely obscure.
Don't they call that deep lore today? Is that what kids call it?
The deep lore, exactly. If those of you that, if you liked Jeffrey Epstein in episode 1, you're gonna love Darya Dugina in episode 100 and whatever this is. In fact, to sort of tone it down a little bit and acknowledge the solemnity of this situation, we're talking here about an assassination in oh, goodness, where to begin? So Darya Dugina is the daughter of Alexander Dugin, who's a philosopher and public figure, public intellectual, who has been, referred to as Putin's brain, although one of the things I want to get into is just how accurate that assessment of him is. The Dugin kind of read on the state of the world and the role of Russia in it is that the world is divided into kind of, manful, vitalist societies and a West, which is increasingly feminized, flattened, globalist, and aggressive, right? And so much of the kind of like we need to invade Ukraine to denazify it. People have seen the influence of Dugin there. Also in the kind of strongmanism idea, there's this idea that this guy who does have a relationship with Putin is somehow the kind of mastermind genius behind all of Putin's kind of ideas about the West as kind of decadent and exporting wokeness all over the place. And this is one reason why some on the new right have also taken an interest in Dugin, because he's saying some things that they would acknowledge to be true, like that, our America's major cultural export now is wokeness. And so, they're just encroaching upon this, closer and closer upon Russia and need to be beaten back in this proxy via Ukraine. So all of this is to say, like, that's the sort of position that this relatively obscure until now figure has occupied, at least in the thought world of people that follow this sort of stuff from the position and standpoint of like American culture wars. His daughter, who I have to confess I did not know existed until I heard about her assassination, has been the victim of a car bombing and is dead. And there's been some question whether, because she and her father were both attending the same conference, there's been some question whether this was a bomb aimed at Dugin himself, or whether Darya, who also has a public presence and is a political and philosophical figure, whether she was the target. It seems like the car she was in did turn out to belong to her and not to her dad. So that's a point in favor of her being the target. But either way, right, somebody somewhere thinks of Dugin as an important enough figure to make him the object of, your kind of classic Russian political assassination. And there's, one question on the table, a lot of things we don't know. One of which is, is this a Ukrainian attack on Dugin, or indeed an internal Russian attack on Dugin to, sort of make Putin look better? Or to sort of galvanize people that, Putin's allies are being assaulted. And then there's the kind of extra question, which I'll add before turning this over, which is this an assassination that is in some ways motivated more by the like Western ideation about the war on Ukraine, which is that Putin is this kind of, crusader, Dugin influenced crusader against what he perceives as a decadent West. Is that idea about Putin kind of bleeding out from online into the real world, when in fact, like the Putin, Dugin is Putin's brain, thing is kind of oversold, and Putin is much more, in a sort of old ancient style of Russian imperialism, just, beating back what he perceives to be his enemies and restoring the glory of the motherland. I don't know how to untangle these various many strains, but it seems like an incredibly pregnant and bizarre little episode that I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on.
Well, this is something that I find fascinating, but I'll be honest, I haven't had the time to investigate. And Dugin himself is a question for me, not someone I've read, someone I just hear people talk about. Always been very interested in him. Right, our friend Michael Millerman, who we published in The American Mind before he started his, I think, successful university online, was studying Dugin and persecuted for it at the University of Toronto. And when I look at it, what really is interesting to me is there's a couple things. I mean, I look at it more like on the imagery, right, and what it means, and it's sort of what you're saying. I mean, did this bleed out from the internet? First off, notice that there is a palpable desire to find Putin's brain, right? There's a real desire to tie ideas in some way to him, and of course, that would have to be an evil figure, since he is the most evil figure in the world, really, for the modern globalized West. China is a threat but gets a pass, but Putin is evil. And so you need to find some ideology to tie to him, and that seems to have happened with Dugin. So it's like he's a fascist. It's not even really. I don't think it really even makes sense what they say about Dugin, but it's more like they need the image, and that leads me to something that I've been thinking about a lot recently because of getting out there in the media for some of the stuff we're doing with New Founding and the podcast, whatever. And one of the things that it really frustrates me, really, because it's just the kind of person I am. But it's very true that people need they remember people, not ideas, right? So they need a name to associate with an idea. And that's okay. I mean, this is on the creative side and the writerly side, people get upset. This is where writers are like, I came up with that idea first, right? I coined that phrase. And it's really kind of silly at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, people are just going to grab onto a certain person's name and they become the prominent exponent of a certain set of ideas, right? And that's just how media works. It's also, to some extent, how the intellectual world works. It doesn't really matter who really came up with something, whatever. There's going to be certain people who become proponents, and people need an easy identification of, oh, that's that guy. That's also the talking head problem, right? I mean, where it goes back to Plato. It doesn't matter who came up with this. Isn't philosophy. These are sort of icons that represent different ideas, right? And so that plays into this in a weird way, where they want to ascribe something to Dugin, but it's not even clear anymore what that is to me. I mean, other than, I guess, some kind of fascism. And then, of course, the truth of the matter is, I know the Orthodox treat him with suspicion, because they regard something, some of them, the conservative Orthodox, think there's something dark going on with Dugin themselves, and not in the way the left does, where he sort of globs onto Christianity, but it's not really that. I have no idea, but yeah, I noticed that. The second thing, real quick, and I'll stop, is this is an assassination or assassination attempt, and it's going on at a time when there's a real powder keg that's already caught fire with the Ukraine, and it's one of these events that doesn't quite fit in anyone's narrative. All those questions Spencer brought up are still open-ended. I haven't heard anyone answer them. I don't know enough to even incline one way or another as to who did it and why. But it's one of these weird events that is a sign to me, just looking at it as an analyst, that things are getting worse and they're getting out of control. Excuse me, I haven't catechized my bots here. You can hear them in the background. But this is one of those events where you can't quite. It doesn't make sense in a variety of ways. It's not clear why and who, and it's one of these things that just is a sign that we're in an acceleration spiral, right? When it comes to the violence, and obviously there's a ton of other questions you could ask about it, but those are the two things that really stand out to me.
Yeah, I mean, I've got zero expertise on any of this, or actually basically zero knowledge. And instead of really wading in where I don't know anything. I'm just going to say, to me, it seems like the sort of thing that if Hillary Clinton were in charge of the U.S., we'd be doing a lot of. And to that end, it makes me think that somehow it comes out of the U.S. intelligence community. But I could be totally wrong about that. Probably am.
Well, no, I mean, I think like the questions that I raise are definitely unanswered and perhaps will remain unanswerable. I mean, to me, the most interesting part of the whole thing is that, that somebody actually thought of Dugin as important enough for this to happen. And there is to be like a little bit pundity for a second, there is a disgusting hypocrisy in people wringing their hands over the attempt on Salman Rushdie and then kind of tacitly cheering the brave hero who assassinated Dugina, right? I mean, if you're for free speech, you're for free speech. But that's kind of like a very surface level thing. To me, it's I don't know. There's something very online about the entire thing. And it's a good argument for our friend Michael Millerman, because his whole thing was like, if indeed this guy is, the worst person ever, then shouldn't there be an expert in him somewhere around? And this whole notion, which pervades the establishment ruling class's entire attitude toward Putin and the Eastern Europe and this whole scenario, is like, it's so bad that you're not even allowed to try to understand it, which is a recipe for catastrophic failure when you think about it. And especially since this is a region that we've just been treated to like 4 years worth of extravagant acrobatic lies about, right? This is Russiagate and collusion and the P tapes and the Ukraine call over impeachment and all of these things, which have just constructed an entire fantasy world. And the greatest thought crime of all is to sort of say, well, okay, what if instead of inventing a sort of MCU story about heroes and villains, we did actually try to figure out like what people's interests are here so that we can defend our own. Like, not even because like Putin's such a great guy, like he's not, he's a terrible person. Like nobody is advocating like, despite the accusations, nobody is advocating like Putin love here. We're talking about like, gee, if indeed there's some really catastrophic geopolitical events going on, like maybe we should understand like what is going on and why. And the fact that we're in this position of having no way of even interpreting this sort of minor but significant event in one of the most major news stories of our time is like the fault of this systematic disinformation campaign that was going on for reasons having only to do with discrediting Trump and nothing to do with actually finding out the truth of the matter. So that's coming around to bite us too. This is all the time we have. So, if you've got Dugina or Dugin takes, you can send them to us. Go listen to Matt's new podcast, The Matthew Peterson Show, available, Matt, I assume wherever you get your podcast. I found it on Apple Podcasts. Is it also on like Stitcher and so on and so forth?
Yeah.
Like such as? Okay.
Yeah, Spotify, a few others, definitely Apple and Spotify. There's a Podbean that'll list out to those.
Okay, great. And you can follow Matt also on Twitter and New Founding and so forth. That's all the time we have. So thank you for listening to the Roundtable. If you want to learn more, you can visit our websites at americanmind.org, claremont.org, claremontreviewbooks.com, and our DC-based Center for the American Way of Life at dc.claremont.org. You can donate to support the show at claremont.org/donate. Don't forget to rate, review, share, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you next week.